how do we all get started involved in motoring? And what sort of background they came from? Well, my father was an electrician at Victorian Railways, and in the Depression he worked 1 week in 3, got married and had a slight inheritance, so that he built a delicatessen shop in East Malvern. And my mother vowed never to marry a shopkeeper because she was the daughter of one in the later part of her young life. But there we go. You had to do what you could. But my father was never interested in money. He was interested in microscopes, the Rationalist Society, the Humanist Society, all of that kind of stuff. But specifically, he was interested in science, geology, and eventually became the president of the Victorian Field Naturalist Club. So that's, he was an intellectual delicatessen. and in a sense could talk to the professors of the Melbourne University about atomic theory and understand black holes, which it wasn't particularly interested in. But in the shop, they had the delicatessen shop. My father had you'll see a photograph, had built a little DKW station wagon in 1938. Sorry. And it was it was one you could take the seats in and out of, and then you could take the panels off the side with a name on it and have windows. So it was a combination station wagon and a van. So I mean, I was being introduced to it whether I liked it or not. I mean, they must have sensed something. Oh, that's my son. That's my son. That's the shop, and that's the DKW sitting outside the front of the shop. It was the car I learned to drive in. Front wheel drive, had free wheel, but unfortunately the free wheel was locked, so it was cable, mechanical brake, pretty anyway. But I learned to drive in that. But as a young man, I was very interested in bikes. But more specifically, I was interested in making money using bikes, so I had a paper round. And as a young man, I was a paper boy probably at the age of 9. And it was at Caulfield, and in that period, the newsagent was one of the first people to buy a 48215 in Derby Road near the Caulfield station. So I worked on that paper round until I was 13. Never studied, never did anything. Went to Melbourne High School, went into the science and medical and maths and German and French and physics and God knows what. And then I was introduced to ice skating. And my old man bought a Buick. This is a Century, and that's got the 320 cubic inch motor in it. Autocar had a road test on that in 1938. It was the fastest volume production car in the world at the time. It was quite a car. I learned to drive in that lane, so I had to back both of those. The DKW initially, when I was about 13, I had to back it all way down the bottom, do a 3-point and drive it out, and it was left out the front. And at the end of the day, I'd take it around. And then, as the years went on, I drove the Buick. Many of you may have done what I did when I was a little kid. This is why I'm showing it, because it might resonate. I used to buy the Saturday Evening Post and clip all the car clippings out of it. And it looks like I got to write up something about MGs. I don't know what it says. I haven't read it, but I might go back and read it one day. At Melbourne High School, I went into the motoring club when I was 13. And interestingly, I didn't realise it at the time, but a couple of young Americans were in it, and their father came out from America for a short period. And I think he was a dynamometer test guy. And the Drayton boys were at Melbourne High School, but I was in the motoring club, but it didn't really appeal to me. But I produced some stuff. I drew all this and produced this at that time. It's all 1951, so I was 13, going on 14. Goodness me, the evolution of modern motoring. Wow. I still draw stuff like that occasionally. struggle for the odd inch. This is the kind of stuff that I was designing my own cars. That's a 48 215 with a bit of Buick on it, a bit of Cadillac on it. All about the same time, all sorts of ideas. And but I became upset. I became interested in skating at the age of 13, and and I played ice hockey, and I think I played in the first game in 1956. It was televised as a 17-year-old. Johnny Nicholas there was, one of the superstars of the day. It was interesting. I mean, this has got nothing to do with motoring, but it's a very quick side. You keep me in line, Peter. But we were playing against all the pre-war European Olympic players from all over the place. Harkoa was a Jewish one. There are other ones that were quite a few Americans. Then I was obsessed with skating. Nothing else mattered in my life at that time. So when in my first game, I played against adults. I was 15, and one of them checked me against the board, and I broke my ankle, both sides of the. And in the team was a bloke called Brian Burnett. Has anybody heard of Brian Burnett? He's a car bodybuilder, and he built the Monza, Lou Marina's bodies. And he drove me to the Alfred Hospital. An hour later, and a couple of brandies for a 15-year-old, and I was home. My parents were suddenly finding out what they were getting at 10:30 at night. Anyway, I dropped out of high school at year 11, and when I was 16, and got a job with N&N Shop Fitters. And one of the jobs I did in 1954, before I turned 17, was I designed a proposed shop front for a Mr. D. Murphy at 280 Chapel Street, Paran. I only realised that. My mother kept all this stuff. Then I joined Holden's. My father got me both jobs. I wasn't interested in work. I was only interested in skating or playing ice hockey. So he got a job at Holden, Fisherman's Bend, and we were in engineering. That's a later photograph. That's the engineering building as it was. And I think, where am I? I'm there somewhere. That's Ray Grigg. He ran South Australian operations eventually. So there's an interesting group of guys. It was a big growth period. That's me at work on the drafting board. In your life, you have things that you're quietly proud of, and one of them was doing the HD centre pillar, which none of this sounds much, but from a perspective point of view, it was the most complex body drafting design job that you could have had. And I think I was 24. We worked 7 days a week on that one because they'd changed, there were some changes in the programs. And knocked it over in 3 months. I had an offsider, young Ray Grigg, come and join and did all the detailed drawings of the centre pillar. But prior to that, I'd got myself. If I go back a bit, I don't think there's much more that I want to. National Service. That's my wife to be in Adelaide, 18 years old. That's the old man in his Buick. Me and my FJ, which I bought when I was very young, and that's my younger brother with the DKW. Got involved in rallying. I think that's me up there, but I was a control official. That's at the back of Wood End somewhere in 1957. And Jill and I used to go on these little trips out the back of Wentworth on the way towards South Australia, north of the Murray. Mobile gas economy runs, we ran those. I became president of the motoring club when I was 20. We had 400 members, Camps Council member. A lot of stories to tell there. This is a different motoring trial. Anyway, I got an FE. We got married in 1960. And I think I went to, I got myself organised to go to South Australia for 3 months. And the South Australians, there's an enormous tool room over there. It was the core of Holden, really the core. And I learned how every body component was made, how it was pressed or die cast or plated or whatever. I learned that. I sat with the guys that designed the tools.
So when did the tool room close?
Good question. I would say the tool room never completely closed.
No,
because in the middle 60s it was starting.
And where did the tool making then go to?
We started in the 60s. It's good because there's nothing much more in the night. You can keep asking the questions, Peter. I'll just see what else is, if there's anything else. That's Woodville. Oh, that's Elizabeth in later years. Oh, and this is me rallying. I won that one as well with Barry Onley. I built a house in Mount Eliza, and we didn't have a made street. When I bought the block of land, it was this is social history in a way, but I didn't have any money. I traded my FB that I went on my wedding and honeymoon on a Mini, got 250 quid, which paid off the block of land and gave me a bit of deposit to build the house at Mount Eliza, and that's it. The street wasn't made. It had water and electricity. That's all.
No phone. No phone. No telephone.
Yeah, we had a telephone. I had to have a telephone. I lived so far away. We didn't have mobiles, and that's my eldest daughter. When I went to Woodville, I took Robin to. Jill and I had Robin when we'd been married just under 12 months, 9 months, 11 months or something. Wasn't that close? And she was 22 and I was 23. And we took at 4 weeks old, we took her to Adelaide on our own, and that was a pretty interesting experience, I can tell you. But we were back by then, and I traded my FB in Callow Faulkners, who were the Rolls-Royce dealers. And look at the number plate. Hasty little Mini 850. I think I was the second one. Tony Roberts had one before me, about a month before. But that I enjoyed that car so much. I had a second one. I did 100,000 miles in the two of them in 4 years.
You didn't get a car for work? You didn't get a work car?
No, I didn't get a work car until I got into public relations. But I was starting to drive engineering cars. By the time I was, I don't know, probably the mid-60s, I was doing a lot of different jobs. That's Mount Eliza. That's the Mini on just a rally survey. So we didn't muck about with it. The technical centre was built, and we won our class in the Mobile Gas Economy run in 179 EH Auto. Was a bit of a larrikin. Then I bought an HD because I had 4 kids by then, and that's in the Flinders Ranges. And I rallied a bit. Even though I had a lot of kids, I'd been club champion for 3 years or something, driver, and Jim McAuliffe was the navigator. I drove Bob Watson's car once in his 48 215, and he still talks about it in the motor show trial in Melbourne. I ran the first motor show trial in 1958 in Melbourne. Anyway, look, that's kind of a bit of background. I don't think there's anything more of Vauxhall V8. I had to have a go with it. That's not a V8. That's a 6-cylinder Monaro with all the kids. The youngest one, hat head, and that was the system that we invented. It virtually, when somebody engineers a component, the engineer determines how it's going to be used and what models are going to be used and what options and whether it's not used on one model or the other. So we use Boolean logic together with except, that kind of stuff, and by symbols. And that engineering release system was the database on which the parts list was built and the bills of material for the manufacturing operation and the forecasts for how many cars, what sort of cars you're going to build arrived from that. And I eventually was appointed as the product program and information manager, and I was responsible for engineering department budgetary control. There's 1,000 people in the place. So I was, I set up a system for cost control on that. And part of my responsibilities was the library, actually. We had 5 people in our library.
Yeah.
And it was, you had things like SAE standards. I had a complete set of AutoCAD going right back. So,
What kind of year was that?
68, but that operation had been going since the beginning. One of the guys was responsible for making a parts list of weights, so it's like a weights list, but we forgot about that. I mean, it was almost something you had to do anyway, but it's a job you had to do. But in the first Holden, particularly, it was the focus to get the car as light as possible. Anyway, so I worked at that, and we did engineering presentations. I built the presentation that was for the HK presentation. You went to that, didn't you? In the styling studio at Fisherman's Bank?
Yes, I think so.
With
Yes.
the 3 projectors and the Gustav Holst, John Chanella. I put together the engineering presentation and the design presentation. I was just the guy in the background that was operating the carousels, but my group and I put it together. We did the Monaro, and the Monaro was the first program I went to in Surface. And I think I went to Warwick Farm when we did the HT with the V8 release.
That was famous because we were using the straight at Warwick Farm. There were tents for lunch and so on, and all the executives were sitting watching the proceedings as we drove up and down, and some of us started to do brake tests, and the cars spun. Any Holden with power-assisted drum brakes just spun. And we did it time after time after time to convince these people that they needed to have superior braking.
Well, we didn't notice.
So, okay, we're starting with the questions.
But Kevin Bartlett was there. I don't think you were there, Spencer, were you?
Mark, was there a HR power disaster when you had a car sort of like seatbelts?
Oh yeah, that was a seatbelt thing. We hung
Aviva. And it was
Viva was which I can't remember which was at the bottom. The Viva was, I think, wasn't it? Yeah,
I've got a photograph.
I've got a nice photograph of that somewhere.
Yeah, I have too.
Don Hayward walking around. Don Hayward was the public relations manager, still alive. Became Minister for Transport in Melbourne, Minister for Education under Kennett. He's walking away. Yeah.
So
Peter.
the seatbelts collapsed in the car.
No, it didn't collapse. It was jerked. The
the
crane
loads.
operator jerked it, and that was enough to break the lock.
Probably increased the load by 3 times.
Yeah. So the first question, you went from engineering to public relations, which is something that's very rare in the car business. There are 2 notable exceptions I'm aware of, one Mazda and one BMW, and they always swapped engineering people into PR and then took them back into engineering. How did you react when the job switch was suggested, and did you ever regret leaving engineering?
Well, my ambition when I was my title called, I was manager of product programs and product information, etc. The etc. was computer systems development and engineering budgetary control. 23 people, and the library. 23 people working. It resulted from a conversation I had with George Roberts, who was the chief engineer at the time, and I can't remember whether I went in or he called me in, and and the consequence was that I'd gone as far as I could. I didn't have an engineering degree. I didn't have a diploma. At that time, there was only one person who'd been Melbourne University, I think. The rest of them were diploma engineers. We had one master's eventually. I'm not going to say he's useless, but anyway, George said, "Look, you're not a qualified engineer. You've gone as far as you can go in engineering department." And I was, at that time, I think I was about 33, and then almost within a couple of months, I was offered the situation to go to the public relations manager in Sydney. My reaction was, I'll go there for 3 years and then I'll come back and get back into engineering, because my ambition was to be a director of product planning, because they didn't have one. So there wasn't one person that was pulling all the decision making together. It was done as a group. And my boss, Wes Thorne, was the executive engineer, and he used to do all the minutes, and that would come to me, and I'd translate that into a business program. The option availability, models and options, and what was to go with what, and what could go with what. At that time, of course, we remember it was HK was the first time this system came into play. We started in '63. Car was released at the beginning of '68.
So was it something you look forward to?
Public relations, never even thought about it. To be quite
Did they offer you more money?
Yes.
Considerably, not much.
Yeah, but I got, all of a sudden I got into the executive. I'd been as part of I was part of what Bill Stonehagen set up as the engineering management team, and I was the youngest member of that. And we used to have, we'd have a dinner meeting once a month or something. We'd have a speaker on some subject or other, including the Westgate Bridge. And there, that was great, because it was just getting with all the guys. I wasn't eligible for the executive dining room at that stage. I got to that stage once, what they call the private payroll, but General Motors culled that throughout, and I didn't know I was on it officially, but I didn't know I was off it officially. I knew because my name didn't go into the computer job control computer system. It went off that list. And this is irrelevant, Peter, isn't it?
So did you, when you had accepted the job, did Don Hayward take you aside and talk you through what was required?
Don Hayward was doing a lot of heavy duty exports research before that, and was appointed to.
So who was your boss? Joe Teal.
Joe Teal.
So Joe, who was not popular with the journalists, did he give you the drum?
With anybody.
Well, but did he tell you what his expectations of you were?
No.
No. So you just
had to work it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
John 80 was the closest I got to anybody that would tell me. But you got to know, journos are interesting people. They don't tell you everything because it's, that's their story to tell. So I thought if I joined public relations, I'd get a lot more information. I got less. I knew more when I was in engineering than I did in public relations.
Right. Did you ever regret leaving engineering?
No, look, at that stage, in the back of my mind, I was going to go up there for 3 years and then go back to Melbourne and take Wes Thorne's job, and be in the product committee. But it didn't happen that way. And it didn't happen that way because my eldest daughter, who by that time was a teenager, and she didn't take to going to Sydney too well. She had 2 or 3 changes of schools when we moved around, and so she was the naughty girl at school. That all got solved, I might add, but still, I became acutely conscious of the disruption. And there were also some guys that had been overseas and their eldest, particularly their eldest, were into drugs and all sorts of stuff. You know, it really disrupted them because they went from being somebody in their own school or known to not being known in an international situation like Iran, for one. And there are two or three that had problems. And I was aware of that. So they didn't, you know, I was offered the job in 1976 as a national marketing manager because this computer system led me to believe I understood how you could utilise it. You could the Holden SSs were created by it. The Holden SS was my concept. I mean, it was just hey, wouldn't it be a good idea to do this? I sent it off to Howard Hewson. He passed it on the Bagshaw. Leo was his first design job in Australia, I found out in recent times, the SS. And so the SS was born out of the specification I sent to Howard Hewson. I had a handwritten note on it. I
So this was when you were in PR.
It's gone.
You did this in PR.
I did it in engineering. I was in engineering, but I knew.
But you're talking 1976.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going back. I'm going back to before I went to Sydney in 1971.
Right.
I might have been early 72. I wrote. I said, why don't we do this to Howard, and he passed it in.
Right.
Passed it on. And it was in May 72. It was one of the first things we did. And I remember that.
Okay, well, you're getting ahead of me.
Yep.
Because I want to ask you why, when Holden always had big song and dance launches for every new model, you did not have a national launch for the HQ.
Yeah.
This was the newest Holden since the 48215. And all we did was we went out to Pagewood and you gave us a car and off we went. We had a big press kit with us, but that was all. Why was there not more made of the HQ?
Well, that's a good question, and it was a silly decision to make because we'd been doing that under Hayward. Because in engineering, I worked with Don Hayward, and you know on the release programs. I went to Surface Paradigm and did the presentation. We briefed the agency. I'm talking to him and you. We briefed our group briefs the agencies on what was coming up. So, and they, you know, so we did a full briefing presentation on that. But
So you
in
don't
terms
know why
of that, and that was really HT was probably the last national release, and then we had HQ, but HG was pretty minor. But it was a disappointment to a lot of us. I think there was a bit of a go with the Hurricane and the GTRX in the middle. But I think it was. I think by that time, Bill Steinhagen had gone as chief engineer. George Roberts took over in 71. I don't know that George was that enthusiastic about the media. We've got lovely stories to tell about that on another day. But Joe Teal just didn't want to do that, Peter. And I think
it was a terrible,
and there was a new manager.
mistake.
Bill Gibbs was not into that. He was out of his depth entirely. So it just didn't.
And Bill was the first Australian to be the boss of Holden. So it was an
apart
important
from the Holden family.
Well, but they're predating the 48215. But in terms of running General Motors Holden, Bill was the first Australian.
Yeah.
And you're saying he was out of his depth.
In that way, he was relying on his directors to advise him. And the directors weren't necessarily, they just went along, you know, to a dinner occasionally, but they weren't involved in the process. And Joe was, I don't know, I have I don't know exactly why.
Okay.
But it didn't really, that didn't happen for quite a few years. So it was, we didn't have, you know, we had the SS, we had a magazine program that we did out at, what's his name?
Lang Lang?
No, at Bob and Head. Oh, what, you know, out north.
Oh, the Coringo
I lived
Chase.
on the south side of Sydney. You don't remember that, do you?
No.
Cropley and Mel Nichols were there, I think. There are a few other guys.
Was that
But
at the tonight, the
what?
police,
Hmm?
at the police,
Beg pardon?
was that at the police, driving?
No. We just went out on the public national park roads,
Oh, okay.
and Mel and Steve Cropley could easily heat 100 miles an hour on those roads.
Yeah.
Is it called Bob and Head?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob and Head. Yeah, out there.
Well, one of the consequences of the HQ was that it was a terrible handling car.
Yeah.
George Roberts believed in ride over everything else. So if you put together an understeering HQ with a bench seat, it was not a good car to drive. And it took them until the HZ to get that right. Before the HZ, there was the LH Tirana, which was one of the few cars in the world that you could buy as a 4, a 6 and an 8. But there was a realisation after Alex Cunningham, who was the head of the region for General Motors, he was in an LH Tirana SLR 5000. And if any of you have been to the Lang Lang Proving Ground, there's a ride and handling track. And you come down straight, and then there's about a 120-degree off-camber left-hand corner. And Alex came barrelling down that corner and just went straight ahead with the understeer. And he realised something was wrong. So one thing led to another. A bloke called Charles Chuck Chapman came to Australia in 1976. He brought out Joe Weitzel, who was a friend of John DeLorean's. They'd worked together at Pontiac. And
Buick?
no, DeLorean was at Pontiac.
Oh, DeLorean. Yeah, he was at Pontiac and then Chevrolet.
And then they decided that they'd get a young engineer called Peter Hannenberger, come out for 6 months and fix these cars. And the first of those cars was the Holden Sunbird.
That's right.
So were you...
I've just written that. Peter, with your encouragement, I've been writing that.
Good.
Can I ask a question of both Mark and Peter? Was Holden surprised that they didn't win Wheels Car of the Year with the HQ Holden?
Yes.
Probably. The Monaro had won it in 68. Yeah, look.
And the Tirana had won it after that.
Didn't resonate as much within the organisation then. Probably in sales. In engineering, it was, oh, well, that's the magazine, that's that's what they do. There wasn't much excitement or disappointment when it didn't get there. I mean,
well, that's not true.
The first HQ I drove home, I thought it was a blancmange,
In December of 1971, Joe Teal, the Director of Public Relations, said to me, "What have we done to upset you?" And I said, "You've done nothing to upset me. You just have to build better cars," which he didn't take very kindly to.
Well,
the suspension problem, was that at the time when they said they're going to have the radial tuned suspension? Was that
that's RTS?
That's the end of it.
That was solving the problem.
Yeah.
And Hannenberger, it got to the point where it wasn't just putting radial ply tyres on the car. They changed the pickup points for the suspension on both the Tirana and the HQ. So it was a serious engineering job.
Yep. I was trying to catch Ray Borrett because he was Peter's offside it with the Sunbird program.
I thought it was Hugh Vidian.
No, Hugh Vidian was Peter's boss when he came out here.
Yes.
But Hugh Vidian and I used to travel together to work together. So I've known Hugh died recently, unfortunately.
Did he?
I think he was 91 or 2 or something. Suddenly.
So is that the story I've told? Is that what your perception is of the story of RTS?
Look, I can tell you the story of RTS. Fundamentally, that was it. Yeah, the Alec Cunningham. I think somehow I got involved with AI, and that's another subject with Phil Scott.
I saw it.
And it's AI is not the worry everybody thinks it is. I think it's got to be it's got to be monetarised. Anyway, we're getting off the track. I got really. It's just another computer. It's just it's just a growth of computer systems. That's all. It's not.
Come back to RTS.
Yeah, RTS. Right. Well, how this is very simply this RTS. Chuck Chapman was appointed. I think the Alec Cunningham thing happened in 1975. I don't know when he was out here. I can't remember the dates. I don't have the information. I haven't asked anybody yet. Chuck came out very early in 76, as I remember it, maybe even before Christmas, but Chuck and Joe came out. The first program we had was the Alex Tirana hatchback, released in Adelaide. I don't know what we did with the magazines, long lead, but anyway, that's where we rented out Adelaide. I devised the drive program. John Bremner did the logistics because he was over there. And what I used to do what I started doing with the drive program was I'd divide all the senior Holden people that were going to take part. This really probably started on Monaro, but it started seriously on the Alex Tirana release. And as best I could, you can never be perfect. I think I rode with you at one stage, but because anyway, that doesn't matter. The significant thing was that the one guy particularly that comes to mind was Jim Sullivan. Jim Sullivan was a pretty good steerer, Spencer.
Yeah, it was.
He was the driver to Europe one year. Jim, I paired up Jim with Joe Whitesell, and Jim got around to demonstrate to Joe, particularly the brake performance. And Joe was so impressed with all the things he was doing, because he was a rally driver as well, that he insisted on staying with him over the next stage. And it was after that impact, and others may have others may have communicated the same information through, but that particularly was very powerful, that demonstration. And it was following that, not long after that, Peter Hannenberger came out. Now, I can't find out when Peter came out. Ray Borrett's off the air somewhere, probably up in Northern Territory somewhere. Ray would know, because he was Ray Borrett was a young engineer at Holden.
I would think 77. I would think 77.
No, this is in 1976, Peter.
Is it?
Because the Sunbird...
No, but Hannenberger coming out was
in 76.
Okay.
Definitely 76.
All right.
Because it was February 76 when the car was launched, when the Alex hatchback was launched, and Joe was subjected to... did you go on that program? Oh, you did. I think you did.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody got drunk. Or went to too many wineries. Anyway, I really want to try and find out, and Ray Borrett's the only one who might know, apart from Peter, when he came out here. But the car there was a magazine long lead in probably October for the Sunbird.
It was.
And Steve Cropley wrote a brilliant story.
And the heading for this story was, "And the bloody thing handles."
Yeah.
Big surprise.
Yeah. Congratulations, GMH.
That's right.
Yep. And the other bloke who went on it was, as an 18-year-old, Mark Fogarty. And he doesn't remember much of it either. So I've only been doing this in the last couple of days, Peter. So that was how it come. The bottom line is that Chapman coming to Australia was a good story for a public relations man, in a sense. So this sounds light, but I saw Chuck Chapman in his background had taken had been the chief engineer, and Opel had become the top-selling car in Europe, and was outselling Volkswagen in Germany. Opel was, with their range. And that was at that time. And Chuck had been there a few years, so he'd been involved in building the car up to that. We looked very seriously at the Ascona before, during the development of the LH. It was just a little bit too small, and it wasn't perceived to be strong enough. So it would have had to be, they could see it had to be re-engineered for Australia. If you're going to do re-engineer and you had to tool it up, which was part of the local content, 99% local content program. So that's where it went. But George had a big influence in that, in things like park brakes and
George Roberts.
yeah. But it was strong enough to carry the 5-litre V8.
Yes.
So, and you could stick a 4-cylinder in it. The Sunbird was a 4-cylinder. But there's no doubt that that car changed. Holden's whole business was in the doldrums, going through there and going through probably from the late 60s through. And there's the background to that. I won't talk about it too much, but the reality was that Whitlam reduced tariffs by 25%. There's 400 yen to the dollar. The wages increased in a couple of years between 73, 74 were 50% cost increase. And that was with 4 weeks annual leave, 15 weeks long service leave, 37.5-hour weeks, and all the wages. You know, this one union would come and say, well, we want that much, they'd get it. And the other one would say, well, we're worth more than them. And there was the Prices Justification Tribunal. So the costs were 6 or 8 months ahead of the prices before you could put the prices up. So it was that was part of it. The oil crisis was occurring at that time, and it was hitting major export markets. We sent a lot of cars to South Africa. We exported probably near enough to 40% of it, 40,000 out of 200,000. What's that? 20%. 20% of our production at least was going overseas.
Well, if that's
40,000
the
cars a
case,
year.
why was the HQ not engineered for left-hand drive?
I was probably too American looking. I don't know.
No.
I think it was, it started to get into the cost of certification of the cars, if you could call it that, compliance. You had to do all the safety test programs, left and right-hand drive, if you wanted to get into volume markets. But I don't know the answer. I think Tirana was, the LH was.
Yes. So RTS the badge was stuck on every Holden that I can remember until the Barina. Remember the Holden Barina? 1985, a badge engineered Suzuki. Who made the decision? Was it management? Was it marketing? Was it engineering not to put RTS badges on the Suzuki?
Were they putting them on any car then?
I think they were.
What, the Chimera?
Yes.
Yeah.
What, Gemini?
Yeah, the Chimera had on it. I think the Barina was the first time Holden was able to import any product in any volume, because Holden, having a 99% local content, didn't have any import licensing. I think they could only bring in about 1,000 cars a year, and so the car wasn't, in a sense, the suspensions weren't developed necessarily for Australia. It was considered to be an urban car, even though my 17-year-old daughter burnt me off at the lights when I was driving the 253 Commodore, I think. She burnt me off in a bloody Barina.
So who do you think would make that decision? Marketing? Engineering? Board?
Well, it'd be a board decision, product program, then board decision. The focus was on, by that time, the focus was on survival. By that time, the focus was really on survival, because you had the the export facilitation program, the four-cylinder engine plant. There was a lot of intellectual decision making being made by academic type people in the planning departments at that time. Ford didn't have any decisions to make. They had to soldier on with the Falcon, and to a lesser extent the Cortina from there on at that stage. But Holden had everything, and they were the we made more of the car than any other motor manufacturer in the world. Holden.
Really?
Yep. And
So when are you talking about now? What period?
Probably the 60s into the early 70s, because it started to run down from there. That was the Australian situation. We were isolated. We didn't have car carriers until the middle 70s.
This brings me back to the question about tooling.
Yep.
And Woodville. And when you backed off tooling locally, where did that tooling go to?
Japan.
Yes.
We started in 67. The new management in that period were very ambitious. They wanted to do things like coupes, and if you look at there was new body styles. There was in the 60s there was the EJEH, then there was the HDHR, completely new bodies. Then there was the HK, HTHG. So you had, in a period of 10 years, you had 4 complete new body styles. The tooling department in Woodville there were 3,000 people at Woodville, and I think hardware, and there was another 1,000 odd people up there. And these were skilled trades and engineers.
So it was a tragedy for Australia to lose it.
It was, but I'm personally, my view, I started to come to the view very early in the piece that the new corporate attitude, because bear in mind that General Motors was owner operated up until the 50s, and you still had Alfred P. Sloan was still around until the middle 60s, and the other bloke who was got to be 100 years old, who was I can't remember his name now, but he was a huge shareholder, an old wagon maker, and the Fisher family was still around. So they were people that the Sloan culture, this culture that took them through the 20s, the growth of the 20s into the 30s, the difficulties in the 30s, and then through the war and the post-war period, immediate post-war period. That culture within the organisation, they owned it, so they spent it. They made the decisions how it would go. It started to soften off after that, and by the mid 60s, you had professional management. And the rich old families that put all their money into foundations, and the foundations were tended to all be, they didn't necessarily, they voted for whoever they wanted to. So they had they had cultural influence of a different kind, social concerns and stuff like that started to come to the before that, but that was in the total country, and it was here too.
How close did Holden come to manufacturing the GTR X?
Well, that was during my period, fairly close, because that was killed off by the
Bagshaw.
The 240Z, the Japanese, the Nissan or the Datsun 240Z, that came into the marketplace. But the pressure on the American manufacturers is so great that they were at one stage they were thinking of killing off the Corvette in that period. And Opel, they had that lovely little coupe.
So Holden just didn't back themselves.
You printed brochures.
Who's having a car demonstration out there? Anyway,
because you did the brochure, you made a couple of prototypes.
Oh well, the brochure was really a promotional brochure,
Right?
And there was a tech spec, and Oh, he's going back the other way, so it's a different thing.
Bagshaw told me that the board had approved the program. They simply wanted him to confirm the numbers, and he couldn't get the numbers up to a point where they were going to be profitable on each car.
Yeah, and
so the board knocked it
compete
back.
with it, and compete with the
Yeah.
with the
Silly,
the
isn't it?
the 240Z.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it, remember that at that time the 400 yen to the dollar, and there's a lot of pressure from the Japanese to buy more from Australia, for us to buy more from them, because they were buying so much iron ore and coal from us, and they were hinting towards buying uranium. And I don't know whether they ever did or not. So, but my understanding of it was, and I wasn't at the Bagshaw level, but I know that they had a bodybuilder lined up. So it was, and I got involved with arguments about whether it should, that little car with 5,000 a year or whatever it was going to be, whether it would interrupt the main engineering systems and become part of that. Every engineer would be involved. It was a bit like HSV. You don't want 20, you don't want 100 engineers being involved in a car that's got 5,000 a year. It just doesn't make sense. The communications the system becomes too cumbersome and inflexible to deal.
They weren't geared for like a niche model. They weren't prepared to make something like in a small production line or whatever.
Well, my view was, my view was that it should be out off-site, but that was only my view. The rest of them had been doing business the same way for 50 years.
It was a great shame because it was a terrific little car.
Yeah, just like
It was
HSV
better
was
looking than
off-site.
the Datsun.
Yeah.
You drove an Imperial, did you, Peter, or just?
Yes. Drove a few times over the years. So
we had a nice. You didn't come, I don't think. We had a nice photo program in the national park and got chucked out, I think.
Did you? You obviously enjoyed organising drive routes for press launches. How did that process evolve, the whole setting up of a drive program? Did you specifically choose the roads to suit the cars, which a lot of manufacturers did? One example is that Ford released their 1.3 litre Escort from Broken Hill, and we had to drive it to Broadmeadows. There wasn't a hill on the whole bloody route because they knew it was so gutless. So, and it happens a lot where the manufacturer.
Yeah, no, look, there's a little bit in that, but I understand that part. I always understood that part. So I always understood that you couldn't be seen to be doing it that way. But I did all of that.
Did you enjoy doing that?
I love driving, Peter. I don't know anybody. I don't care what it is. I'll drive it. I love it, and that's sort of. I don't like handling a spanner or restoring or anything or even washing, but I love driving it. I like driving cars. So I would go out on my own and survey the routes. I think.
Okay, we're being given the wind-up sign, so I just want to ask you a couple of questions.
I thought you went to 2:00.
How, or do you feel that local car manufacturing could have been saved in Australia?
Personally, I believe it should have been saved for national security reasons and for technological reasons. The reality is, it's being associated with the old car movement, I've come to realise that in the last 50 plus years, the average car restorer has got more gear in his more complex machinery in his garage or his shed than the car industry had in the 30s. I mean, they had the big stuff, but except that we've got that technology. We've got a lot of technology that's still there, but it's not associated with driving the cars on the road. It's not associated with reliability. It's associated with doing 1,000 kilometres before the end of the race. And so we've got that technology, but we don't have the incredibly broad technology and experience to make things in volume. and we seem to have lost track of work study. In other words, having a look at working out how much effort you put into it, whether it's cost effective or not. And that's what car manufacturing was. And I learned this when I was in Adelaide. I studied the release of every part in the car, every part, before I started on the computer system. You have to look at that detail, and then you might decide that you don't try and computerize everything, and you throw a few pieces out that people can work out, make some decisions on outside of the computer system. But we don't know that anymore. We don't have that sense of it. We can make great race cars. We can make individual things. We can make 50 or 60 or 100 tanks or military vehicles, but we can't make 10,000 of them. And you look at even drones. We can probably make a few drones, but can we make? That's an industry you're starting from scratch, so that's perhaps not quite in the same class. But I was involved in the 60s with the Department of Defence in engineering, and they'd come out and the Department of Defence said, come out and have a look at all your facilities, and you would look at their needs. So it wasn't that they were going to buy anything from you, but it's just so that they had and this is probably not that long after the war, 15 or 20 years after the war, that, so they were there learning about what you might need, and how it might be built, because Australia is very isolated. And of course, without any significant kind of volume industry, we are very vulnerable right now. But that's my political speech.
With that isolation, how much stock in time did Holden have to keep so that in case something hit the fan, that they could keep going without running out of this bolt that has to hold? One item can stop the whole car.
Well, Holden was in a position where it was 99% local content, so there was not much that they imported.
No.
And that started to be diversified, probably with the American V8s coming into the car, and the first power glide automatic transmission, and then the later transmission. But that narrows down what you have to be chasing for. It simplifies the planning process of how, thinking about what you might need to do in those kind of situations.
And cuts cost.
One last question. How did you feel? What were your thoughts in 2020 when you heard that the Holden brand was dying?
I was disappointed.
Mike Simcoe can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Still.
No, it's very, I mean, I in a sense, sounds stupid to say this, I dedicated my life to the brand. But, the decision's made, you've got to move on. But all of this stuff goes back to the 60s. The government made decisions in the middle 40s, the early 40s, about starting a car industry, and I think what was it, 35% tariffs or whatever it was. You made the car here, or you paid 35% tariff. And then in the 60s, Jack McEwen started to say, "Oh, look, somebody wants, Renault wants to bring." So we had low volume programs, 5,000 cars, and then and it suddenly became a lawyer's nightmare. Then safety came in, and then we got a stupid situation where Holden Utilities had to have all of the emission and safety components of the cars, because they were a car derivative. They were built off not off the same platform, but pretty close to it. But you could import a Land Cruiser and pay 5% tax, or a four-wheel drive and pay 5%. You could import a Mitsubishi 5%, and then put the seats in it and make a van out of it. So all that stuff snuck in. There were people doing all sorts of stuff. I think people were bringing in Hillman vans and turning them into station wagons.
Volvo did that for a time.
Yeah, So, and look, we even had the stupid situation where we were bringing cars, bringing things like jackaroos in without air conditioning in, and have the dealer would install it and they'd save money. It was cheaper. So it got beyond the decision makers couldn't make those kind of decisions.
No. What are you driving today?
The Skoda. Well, it's the closest thing I could get to an Astra. And the 1.6.
Which model? Which model?
Scala. That's a little red one down there.
Ah, right.
Yeah, look, the dealership was down the road, and I didn't like the Holden dealer in Wollongong, and the Holden had done 106,000 miles. And I thought, God, if I've got to drive this across this Perth or something with 106,000 k's on it, and it breaks down, where are my finances going to be? I've got a 7-year warranty.
Thank you very much, Mark. I hope that's not been too tedious.
Thank you, Peter.